Start. Hit start.
Talkshoe. Recorded live.
Stephen, are you there?
I'm here.
Good.
Okay, let me do. This is Rod. We got a special guest on here. Gonna sit here and tell you what they have seen at the State Highway Patrol barracks, and they're going to discuss a little bit with you what they have witnessed and what has happened here, on what they have seen and what in the argument or debate that came out of this thing. So, Art, I will go ahead and let you start off, and you got the floor, and go ahead and explain to the people.
Okay. Yeah. This is so vitally important. I want everybody to kind of understand what's actually happening out here. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, a very good friend of mine and I had the occasion to go to the Asheville Troop G office of the NC Highway Patrol, and we went there to address a traffic citation. Also, we went there to file an informal administrative complaint against a highway patrolman who, in an open court, had made a statement against that friend, calling him a domestic terrorist or something to that effect. So we went ahead and we tried to file an informal admin complaint, and that's pursuant to North Carolina State General Statutes. When we went into the office, we had the opportunity to meet the guy that was going to be doing the hearing. And, of course, I knew at that point in time we were in big trouble because this guy was a ex-Marine Corps drill in that structure con. Basically, make a long story short, Rod, he took my good close personal friend who happens to be on this actual call, and he took him into his office. And when I tried to go into the office, he literally slammed his office actual door. And I was so mad I couldn't see straight. Well, I didn't need to do too much anything because I looked on the outside of it, and on the outside of it he had posted on his door, Rod, some statement from a top law enforcement guy that these guys think is, somebody that they would like to be able to look up to. And it was from some law enforcement officer from the 1950s, like 1953, 50, the 4 in that area. And basically the gist of what the statement had to say is that anybody who would dare to resist an armed law officer needs to be terminated. Needs to be essentially terminated, and that the officer is not to give it a second thought, that he's to go ahead and act, because by taking anybody out who would dare to resist an armed law enforcement officer, they would be improving things. So when I saw that happen, I then immediately came home. We were able to get the that statement, and I was able to contact the governor. Not the governor himself, but we called the governor's secretary. I got on the phone to her and hammered her, and within probably about a half an hour to an hour after that, I got a call from the head office of the Highway Patrol. And it was the number 2 guy that was in charge of it, and I forget who he is. And I essentially went through this whole thing, and I got really hot, and I got really heavy about this, because essentially what this essentially means, Rod, is that the Highway Patrol in their own offices are posting. Now, keep in mind, this guy had 21 highway patrolmen, under him, 21 of them. So every time they went into his office, they would go and they would see this thing. So I basically just got really hot and heavy about that. They promised me that they would look into this completely, which is actually true. That's what happened. They, they just basically came out and said, listen, we want to assure you, Mr. Patton, that it is not the belief of the Highway Patrol that we're going to go out here and execute people at traffic stops. Please don't believe that. And I said, listen, as far as I'm concerned, until you can prove otherwise, the prima facie evidence is that the North Carolina Highway Patrolmen are being taught a policy that if anybody dares to, in any way, shape, or form, constitutionally at a traffic stop, even challenge them, that there is the option of taking out the officer's gun, and of course, I think you know what will happen after that. So I got a call back probably within 2 hours from the commander of the Asheville Troop G office. And I was on the phone with him for about an hour. And he said, I want to assure you that this problem, Mr., has been taken care of completely. I want to assure you that we don't in any way, shape, or form agree with any of that. And I said, oh, no. You don't get off as easy as that. I said, that was hanging up on the door of the number 2 guy over there in your office. And you cannot tell me that you didn't have any idea that was hanging up there. He goes, well, I didn't, he had no answer. He had no answer at all. So I was asked a question the other day, do you think that this big confrontation I had with the Highway Patrol helped anything? No, it didn't help anything, Rod. And the reason why it didn't help anything, you're the proof that it hasn't helped anything. You had a gun pointed to your head, just like I've had a gun pointed by a highway patrolman to my head when he asked me to reach in and get identification. Once I attempted to reach in and get identification, he pulled a gun out and put it to my head. And I'll never forget it. And I mean, what we're basically looking at here, Rod, these guys are being under total federal control, okay? And they are being taught at a traffic stop that it is an option, that if anybody gives them a hard time, they can pull out a gun and execute you. And that is the prima facie evidence here. So I think we have a very big problem. And if anybody wants to check out anything I'm saying, we have on the phone right now the guy that I was attempting to do this administrative, and he'll go ahead and explain. He'll go ahead and explain all of it. If you could go ahead and explain it to them. Hi, are you still there?
I'm here. Well, from my point of view, basically what happened is back in 2011, I was pulled over and cited by the Highway Patrol. Since there was no signature or promise to appear on the ticket, I took it as an invitation, and I simply declined the invitation and never showed up. So here we are over 2 years later in November 2013, and because I asked an officer what his reasonable suspicion was for running the tag on the vehicle that I was riding in, they ran my ID, and evidently there was a warrant. So that got me sucked up into the court system. Well, my first appearance in court, I had a nice, friendly discussion with the assistant DA, and when the assistant DA asked the trooper if he remembered this one, the trooper basically stated, oh, yeah, I remember this one. He's one of them there sovereigns.
Sovereign citizens.
And I said, excuse me? I said, I never said one thing about being sovereign. I said, you need to get your facts straight, officer. And then I made some kind of comment about if he's the cream of the crop of law enforcement in this state, the state's in a lot of trouble. And anyway, long story short, I filed with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and as part of the procedure, I called the Highway Troop G here in Asheville, and I scheduled an informal admin hearing directly, with the Highway Patrol, and that's where Art came in. Me and him went down there, and like Art said, they separated us immediately. He took me back into the office, and we had our discussion, and Art was left out there in the waiting area when Art spotted that statement basically taped to his door.
Yeah, and another thing I want to go ahead and emphasize to everybody is I'm exhibiting symptoms of what's called the Stockholm syndrome. I should have immediately filed a complaint when an officer took his handgun and put it to my head, but because the guy came to me and he said, "Mr. Patton, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that." He said, "Please, from the bottom of my heart, I want you to accept my apology." And then the highway patrolman proceeded to tell me the state was out of control. And I think at that point in time, Rod, that he had a very clear-cut idea how close he came to taking that gun and blowing my actual head off. They took me out of the car, handcuffed me, put me on my hands and knees, and handcuffed me in front of everybody. I've had people call me and say, "I saw you out on the 1923 bypass, and you were on your hands and knees handcuffed. What is that whole thing over?" And, of course, I got the same charge that you got, which is obstruction. And at that point in time after this incident, Rod, don't you remember I gave you a call? And I told you I had gone through the annotated histories, and we had found out that pursuant to the annotated histories that they can't charge you with obstruction unless they have moving court stuff in their hand. They're either serving criminal process on you or civil, and you do something to obstruct them. And, of course, now since I've sent you the actual annotated histories, you know all of that is now true. They are you don't obey these guys obey their orders. They're going to take a handgun out, and there is a very strong likelihood that at a traffic stop you're going to be literally executed.
Yeah. One of the statements, and I found this quite interesting, when I was in the office with First Sergeant Gilreath, and I, was explaining what happened in court and everything, and, my problems with the highway patrol. He made a statement to me that really stuck out, and I don't know what these guys are being told, but they're wrong. And what he said was, well, not all your sovereigns are these wackos that bomb buildings and stuff. Some of them just believe in the Constitution the way it was, not the way it is.
Yes, that's a very interesting statement. And when I had the opportunity to get on the phone with the head of Troop G, that's one of the things I explained to him. I said, that this officer, this trooper that was doing the informal admin hearing, stated that. And that got this guy angry. Rod, I'm telling you, he said he should have never said that. Now, that's one of the things I recall distinctly about it. He said he should have never even said that. So I'm probably assuming that this guy got into it without trouble.
It tells me that they're being, fed a load of crap, that somebody's lying to them and they're buying into the lie.
Yes, which, as we both know, we're talking about the guys, and we have proven this, Rod. I've sent you the concrete evidence on it, that these guys have IQs between 83 and 100. And it's just, and the whole thing about the highway patrolmen, when I had them on the phone, they promised me, they said, "Sir, please, we are going to assure you this problem is being handled." Well, Ron, it hasn't been handled because you had a gun placed to your head.
Well, it wasn't placed, but he had it pulled. He didn't place it to my head. He had it drawn on me. Well,
whether it was to your head or whether it was drawn on you, the simple fact of the matter is, and you know as well as I do, the officer then, you never call a highway patrolman an officer. He told you that you had come dangerously close to being executed.
Yep. Well, this is why we did the heads-up warning call here a couple of days ago on this, and this is why these guys have come forward, because they've actually seen firsthand the sign posted outside the door of the orders to shoot. This isn't imaginary. This is a sign that was actually signed. And most people don't go inside the highway patrol barracks, and they definitely don't go back in and talk to the head. So they was relatively safe that this sign was never going to be seen by the civilian side of this thing. And the fact that this did come about, the sign was there. It was evidence that it was proof that this is what these guys are being told. And this is a major serious problem. And the thing is, the one who is telling them this is the one who's coming in and teaching them the law. And it isn't you and I. It is the Bar Association. It is the bar attorney that's coming in and telling them what they can get away with, and they would cover it up. And if they want to assassinate, they just call it self-defense because they was in fear of their life, and therefore they had to take a life. Well, that comes right down to murder, because if you and I was to sit here and just pull a gun and just shoot somebody, say, we was in fear, and they didn't have a gun, they didn't have any weapons, it would be flat-out murder. Now, these guys are supposed to be trained, experienced people to be able to handle a gun, not just pull it and shoot it. And that's where the problem's coming in.
I think one of the absolute scary things, of course, is a very harrowing experience for me getting on the phone with you. And and everything that happened in your incident with these guys, Rod, it's the same thing I had happen. And here's the most important thing. When I reached in to show him ID, as he had asked for, that's when the gun came out.
They have made it now to where you can't move, but if you don't move, they got you for obstruction. If you do move, you run the risk of being shot.
Yeah, and I was placed, Rod, this is extremely interesting. I was placed on my hands and knees execution style, okay? Placed on my hands and knees where everybody in the county could see what was happening, and literally placed on my hands and knees. And at that, how many people have we seen? That, if you're going to execute people, this is generally how it happens.
Yep, it's been done on TV. It was done in Vietnam. You can sit here and see on different issues, and this is how they have always placed the execution style, is down on your knees with your hands behind your back, and this way you can't push yourself up and get out of the way. But people, this is a warning of what we're up against, and this has come down to a very, very serious problem. And it comes right down to their education and who is teaching them this and who is telling them to go do this. Because these guys aren't doing it on their own. They're not doing it. They never would have done it initially. They had to be told. And this is where the problem's coming in. They are only following orders. And that, like I told you before, this goes right back into Nuremberg. Germany, the military said, well, we're only following orders. We're only following orders. Well, they got hung. But there was 2 Nuremberg trials, one for the military and one for the public official side. And they said, well, we was only following orders. It didn't make no difference. You have a moral obligation here of right and wrong. And that is what's being taken away. They're being told there is no morals here, just shoot them, because that's just one less we're going to have to deal with later. And that's coming down to the mentality out here. And that is really, it's coming real close, and that's a shame that this now.
Well, they operate in a total realm of fear, and you see it every day. I mean, if they pull somebody over for jaywalking, you see no less than 3 cop cars on the scene.
Yes.
They swarm. Every little thing they swarm, and they're operating in a total sense of fear. This is boiled down. This is a us between them mentality, and it's dangerous and it's scary.
And I also want to emphasize to somebody, to all the people that are going to be listening to this, when you have this incident happen to you, you're not objective to it. After it happened, everybody that I know said, Art, file a complaint. Get and file a complaint. And I said, well, no, I'm not going to file a complaint on the guy because he came to me, shook my hand, and said, I am so sorry. And once he found out who he had, he probably had a pretty good general idea of what was going to be happening. And said, okay, I assure you I'm going to drop this whole thing. And I never said anything to anyone. I dropped the whole Then after this incident that happened when we tried to file the administrative complaint, they got on the phone and they said, please, Mr. Patton, we're going to assure you that this matter is being held. You don't need to contact anybody. You don't need to expose this. We are going to get this problem straightened out. Well, don't trust them. Don't believe anything they have to say at all. They have, and I'm sure, now even after all of this happens, that instead of getting the problem straightened out, it's going to go in the opposite direction. They're going to get even more heated. And if I can emphasize to all the people out here, if you have any encounter with these guys, immediately file a complaint on them.
It's nothing personal. You know, the guy could be the nicest guy in the world. You don't know who he is outside of that uniform. But when he's in that uniform, he's responsible, and we need to hold him accountable.
Yes, another thing I want to go ahead and emphasize is that when I was talking to this highway patrolman, he must have really come to the conclusion that he was out of control, because he said that the state is totally out of control. Now, I'm not going to tell you who the highway patrolman is.
Oh, no names. We don't want to get them into trouble. But they're following orders here, but they're being pressured.
Absolutely.
But what this also indicates to me is that they do, once they have an understanding of how close they came to executing you, at that point in time, they are then thinking to themselves, what am I doing? Why is this happening? Why did I come so close to executing someone? So, and he was completely honest with me, Rod. He said, quote unquote, the state is out of control. And by the way, since that incident happened with this particular highway patrolman, I don't even know if he's still here. I don't think that he is. And keep in mind, too, that after this incident happened, I had found out this particular highway patrolman has a history of this. He has a history of pulling out handguns. He has a history of being out of control. I talked to one of the top bar card agents, and this bar card agent at a traffic stop with this particular highway patrolman had the same, not the same thing happen, but this guy started to give this bar card agent a hard, and this bar card agent, Rod, is not the kind of honcho that you would ever want to, argue with, because he's the author of the North Carolina Administrative Procedures Act. He's the guy that knows more about the highway patrolman than just about anybody. And if they would give him a hard time, this guy, they gave him a hard time, Rod. This is how out of control. They don't care who you are.
Well, this is where the problem's coming in. Like I said, these guys are being taught, and they're in some ways you can't blame them because they're trying to do a job out here, but they are being pressured by somebody above them that is abusing the system, and these guys are being used as patsies.
Absolutely.
On a lot of, and they are just being flat out used. That's the bottom line here. They're just flat out being used. And then
I don't know.
Think about the
I don't know if I ever told you. It was a very short period of time after that. I learned about a incident that happened where a car was, pulled over, and there was like 4 or 5 people in the car, and an out of control. I don't think it was a highway patrolman, but they got a hold of some young guy, and he was a high and tight guy. And he started to violate everybody in that car. One of the people that was in the back seat of that car was a United States federal court judge, and he filed a complaint also. So, this is now happening all over, and the fact that even they're even doing it to and by the way, this officer told the federal court judge to shut up and to be quiet. After he said, listen, you can't do this, you're out of control, and he identified himself. You think that stopped him? That's how out of control these guys are. If you would give a United States federal court judge a hard time having, if you've got an IQ of 83 or 100 or within that area, and you start to give a United States federal court judge a hard time, that's unbelievable. And the federal court judge filed a complaint with the then governor of the, actual state.
Well, like I said, the thing is, these judges know this, but until that happens to them, they don't care.
Yes.
And now when it happens to them, now they are being disrespected, and this is where the problem's coming in. The judges are not looking at this as what's right and what's wrong. But again, we're walking right back into where we're dealing with bar agents here, and these guys are on the bench for profit. And that's where the issue comes in. They're in the bench for profit. And these guys are out here trying to collect that profit for the corporation. But they're not really understanding that they're not getting any of this. Now, they may get some kickbacks off the seatbelt, but they're not getting the kickbacks off the Highway Safety Act. No, these guys are being used in order to fill the pockets of the court system and the court officers. And this is what is where the issues are really coming in at. And these guys, I got a lot of respect for these guys because these guys do come out here, and there are people out here that do get out of control and they do get out of line. And I understand that. But I also understand is that you getting out of a car and trying to talk to them is not justification to turn around and nail you for obstruction.
Yeah,
they want you to stay inside the car. Well, wait a minute. You got a set of flashing lights on. You're an emergency vehicle. You're pulling behind me. That's obvious that you must have a problem because I'm coming up to see what you want. And now you're going to sit down and order me to get in the car?
Right. And I think the most important thing to understand is there's no substantive law in policy that says you have to get out of the car, you have to stay in the car, or any of that. As a matter of fact, you going through that annotated history, Rod, was interesting because one of the things that the annotated history said repeatedly is that you have the option of not complying with anything.
Well, you do, but you're also running into the fact that here you are, you got somebody coming in behind you with a set of lights. That's a set of emergency flashers, and that's what they call them. And you're pulling over because sometimes they go past you. Now, they're pulling in behind you. Now, if they're pulling in behind you, there's definitely got to be an emergency. If there's a problem here, all you're doing is being courteous and being polite by coming out to him and talking to him.
Yeah.
So courtesy and being polite goes right out the window because being courtesy and polite now is taken as being obstructive and being threatening because how dare you get out of the car and come back and talk to me?
And see, the whole problem I've got is, I've never had any history at all. Now I've got an obstruction on me, and until I can get this problem straightened out, I'm just like you, Rod. I've been so busy taking care of all the rest of these people's problems that I haven't had an opportunity to take care of the ones that I have. I still have an obstruction out there, and I've been turned down for I filed in employment applications. I've been turned down for countless jobs. So it's hurting me.
Well,
it is, and they don't care. They don't care that they ruin you. That's the problem here.
Well, that's one of the problems I have with this whole system is because it doesn't matter if their case is dismissed, dropped, discharged, whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact that you were cited in the first place is going to show up on every background check that's done on you. So you're tried and convicted just on the issue of the citation.
Plus also when you're talking about an obstruction charge, when the average person thinks about that means, well, this is a guy that doesn't obey. You know, he doesn't obey. So if he doesn't obey what a highway patrolman says, he's obviously not going to obey. You know, it's just there is such a huge stigma that is, you know, I mean, these guys have the capability not only of executing you. That's the easy part of it. But then after you get charged with obstruction because you've got an obstruction charge, you've got to walk for dead. I mean, you are totally ostracized.
Yeah. Well, this is where the problem's coming in. You know, they always learn to escalate the problem, and that is definitely a big issue here. They escalate it in order to create the problem. Go ahead.
I tell you, one of the things that one of the things that's absolutely scared of me, these guys, Rod, are being brainwashed.
Yep.
They are totally brainwashed. And it was after this incident happened, this highway patrolman came to me and he said, "Listen, the states, when they're confronted with how close they have come to actually pulling the trigger and executing somebody, it's at that point in time they're, you know, saying, hey, listen, I'm out of control. The highway patrol is out of control." I mean, when you pull a gun and execute somebody, especially the thing that's extremely scary here that happened in each of our actual circumstances, I was reaching in to come by. He'd asked me for identification, and I reached into my pocket and I was going to give him identification. And it's at that point in time that gun came out and he put it right to my head. And I'll never forget this, right? I was looking into his eyes, and when I looked into his, that gun was going to the right, it was going to the left. He was about as unstable as anybody could be.
But Art, in all fairness too, that officer should not even have been on the road. He had lost a fellow officer in a traffic stop who was gunned down. So this guy is obviously suffering from PTSD or something.
Absolutely. And thank you. I forgot that. The officer was the closest friend of a highway patrolman that was gunned. And so he's obviously suffering from all sorts of things. And, Rod, here's the thing. Even the DA over here told me that this officer had been involved in countless confrontations. Countless. And he's still out there.
Well, this goes right back into post-traumatic stress, where these guys are on the breaking edge, like the guys in the military being out in the field. You know, like I said, there is a certain amount of justification, but these guys are supposed to be trained professionals. You know, and like I said, any time that you are being pulled over, you ought to be able to get out and hold a conversation with them. There should not be a fact that you got a fear whether you're going to be shot because you got out of the car or you're trying to come in compliance. You know, there is a courtesy here. If someone stops you, get out and you talk.
Yeah, and the thing that says I have to emphasize again, Rod, I was doing everything that he had asked me for. He asked me for ID, and I was reaching in to give him that, and that's when the gun came out. Well,
like I said, this is why I got you guys on here, because the sign that you seen down at the Highway Patrol barracks told him to shoot. That is a very serious issue. That's a very serious issue, that these guys are even being trained and documented. The moment someone objects or questions, they are to sit down and shoot you down. That's a very serious problem.
When I got the highway patrol on the phone, I had the opportunity after this incident happened down there that I was able to literally hammer them for about an hour, and they sat back, Rod, and they listened to everything I said, and they did not say anything. And all they could say is, please don't tell anybody. That's what they said. And like a complete idiot, I said, okay, as far as I'm concerned, guys, I'm going to let this go, but you have promised me that you're going to get this problem straightened out. They have not only not got the problem straightened out, it looks like after this whole incident happened, they are now totally out of control. By the way, as far as the highway patrol and everybody involved in this particular instance, they got into trouble, massive amounts of trouble.
Well, like I said, the gentleman that I talked to, he calmed down, and we shook hands, but he said, "You come awful close." I said, "No, look, I try to come in compliance. You ask. But you put your hand behind your back." Well, I had a set of keys, and he's right. I did put my keys back on my belt loop because that's where I carry them. But I also had 2 wallets, and he found both wallets. I had one out, and I wasn't real sure which one the driver's license was in. So even trying to come in compliance, like I said, you can't even come in compliance without the possibility of having a gun drawn on you. And that is a very serious issue here, because the bottom line is, even sitting in your car, I don't care how, even sitting in your car, if you have a pistol in the back side and you're reaching, you can pull that out just as quick and have the incident inside the car as what you can outside the car.
And, of course, one of the things that was interesting what happened to me is after I was taken outside of the car and handcuffed on my hands and knees, he then gets into my car, and I'm sitting there saying, "I do not authorize you to get into my car. Get out of there. You don't have a Fourth Amendment." You think that stopped him? He went through everything in that car completely.
Well, I do have a medical report for me that I'm not supposed to be wearing a seatbelt. And it goes in here, "To whom it may concern, Rodney Dale Class, 435 North Lincoln Street, High Shoals, North Carolina, 28077. Mr. Class has presented with a lumbar sacral condition, which corresponds to the sacral pain, which is in compliance by neck and chest pain, which is accumulated by pressure from his seatbelt. His permanent disability, and it is recommended that he not travel or sit in an upright position for long periods of time. When he does travel, he is recommended that he's not to have an additional pressure of seatbelt across his abdomen and chest." And I got a doctor's signature on this. Well, I didn't even get a chance to get this out because he wasn't allowing me to explain nothing to him, and he was busy ordering, and like I said, it come right down to where the moment you try to comply, the gun come out.
Didn't you also tell me that when they were attempting to handcuff you, that he was saying stop?
Yep.
Stop resisting.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, as big as what I am, for him to have just a single set of handcuffs, my arms do not go back behind my back. When you start pulling my arms, you're pulling my shoulders into the sockets, and my arms don't go back that far. So again, even at that point, to try to get my arms back, that there is resistance here. But he didn't have any problems handcuffing me in the front. There was absolutely no problem handcuffing me in the front.
Yeah, there's also something very, very interesting here too, Rod. After 2008, they were able to pull you over if they saw that you weren't wearing a seatbelt. Prior to 2008, they couldn't do that. If you were at a traffic stop and the officer, pulled you over and he saw you weren't wearing a seatbelt, then they could issue that. But now the law has changed. If they see you and you don't have on one of those things, they could immediately pull you over.
Okay, let's stop and talk about this here for a minute, because let's get in to the Constitution. What authority? Where does the authority, and what authority does Congress have in creating what kinds of laws? Congress only has, under the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, Congress can only levy laws that deals with commerce or foreign nationals. They cannot create laws against a citizen. They can only create laws that deals with commerce or foreign affairs. And really think about what we're saying here. A seatbelt is a commerce issue, as an automobile is commerce. They cannot create laws against the private citizen, but they can only create laws that deals with commerce. So it's automatically coming into a commerce issue.
Absolutely, and this is all under, as you know as well as I do, Rod, it's all under federal control. The Highway Patrol is in with the FBI completely. And I know people are going to find that hard to believe. Well, listen, here's how in bed with the FBI they are. The radio frequency that they operate on is the same radio frequency the FBI is on.
So, they're, again, even under your state constitution, if you really go back and look at your state constitution side of this thing, they can only deal with commercial activities. They can only deal with the restricted. They can't make laws against John Q. Public. They don't have that authority under the Constitution.
Yes.
And it deals with businesses. Education, that deals with the state here on the level of education. But I have yet to find anything in any of these constitutions that gives legislation power over the people. It doesn't give power over the people. It doesn't allow them. These are all administrative regulations. These all deals with commercial and activities, commerce.
I find that to be extremely interesting, and don't you find it interesting that this highway patrolman conceded the fact that he listens to your program?
Well, yeah, this is it. They are sitting down and they are listening. They are monitoring this program on a regular basis. Not only the highway patrol, but the FBI. The whole 9 yards here.
So I find it unbelievable that he's able to listen to your program, and then he's obviously able to go and see black ink on actual paper that shows the only authority, as you were saying, that these guys have is to do stuff that only involves what? Commercial motor vehicle traffic enforcement, and that's it.
That's it. This is where their line draws, but they have suckered us in. But see, where this comes back in is under that birth certificate, because that birth certificate, whenever you are born, is that birth name is put into the commerce side of a trust. And this is where the issue's coming in. And it doesn't matter whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're yellow, green, or red. That birth certificate puts you in on the commerce side, and it has nothing to do with the living man. And that birth certificate, ladies and gentlemen, it's registered to the state. It's registered to the state. That birth certificate, if you stop and think, actually is being held by the state. It is impossible for that birth certificate to come out and to commit a crime out on the street because it's in custody 24/7 with the state. Because where's that? And for you to get a copy of the birth certificate, that is a mere copy. That is not the original. That's a mere copy of the birth certificate. Because they're not going to give you the original.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things I want to go ahead and emphasize too is don't think that you haven't heard them. We've all heard them. We're now educating all of them. I was talking to a highway patrolman the other day, and he came out and said, listen, I understand the state has not told us the truth. So the most important thing is that they are beginning to get the idea that they are not being told the whole truth here, and that has hurt them.
See, that's the impression that I've got with the one that I've talked to. They're not being told the whole truth, and they pretty much know the laws aren't really valid, but they're being told to enforce something that they really know that they sort of disagree with. That's sort of the impression that I got here on this. But the bottom line boils down to, people, if you really stop and truly think here, really think and think about this. In the federal constitution, in your state constitution, there is nothing written in there that allows them to create laws against the private citizen. They can only deal with commerce. They can only deal with commercial activity. They can only deal with agencies on regulations. And that isn't me. Go back and read it for yourself and see. This is where the problem's coming in, is that these officers they're coming out and sitting down saying, well, you don't believe that the law applies to you. No, you have never heard that. I am sitting here saying, okay, if the word person is in the legal definition, and that word person defines a corporation, an association, a trust, a joint stock, an insurance company, an agency, an instrument of the government. It sits here and lays all this stuff out. Stop and think here for 1 minute. If this is the legal definition in the law books about the word person, how does it apply to the flesh and blood? How do you explain that I am a corporation? How do you justify I am a trust? How do you justify that I am a piece of real estate? Where does this come from? So I'm not saying the laws don't apply to me. I want you to show how it does, because this is where the confusion is coming in.
One of the things here, Rod, that's absolutely staggering is that when they bring you into court on an obstruction charge, the DA knows that obstruction charge doesn't apply to you at all, okay? But They go ahead anyway, and they are all in this. That is fraud. It is treason. It's anything that you want to. And when I was charged with obstruction, I was in court, and an attorney said, Art, he goes, I would go ahead and take a plea deal on this. He goes, the Highway Patrol is never going to drop this charge. And he said the reason that they're not going to drop them is that they're terrified you're going to take them to an administrative hearing. Rod, I never knew about admin hearings until you explained them. These guys are terrified of an administrative hearing. I can tell you firsthand. And, of course, this is what we all need to be actually doing here is getting them into an administrative hearing. Plus, you have to. If you're going to take any action on them, you're going to have to first get them into into one of these hearings.
Well, we do, and this is part of what we're trying to get in, because once we've learned in the past, once we pull them in, the administrative hearing denies any liability and denies that they are even part of the state. So the administrative hearing basically has thrown these guys to the wolves.
Absolutely. Yes.
They have literally thrown these guys to the wolves on this stuff. And because, your friend that has already taken them in and got that ruling, no, they're not part of the state. And the rulings that I've gotten where the law enforcement is not part of the state and DOT is not part of the state and tax department is not part of the state, they're all private contractors. This is where they're creating a problem here, because once we start understanding this, then these guys want to come in behind and want to hit us with a set of lights. Well, we've already found out you're not who you say you are. You are impersonating.
Yes.
You're impersonating. Because and once, the thing should have came up, once that tag come up, and even though I had my wife's little Honda, once that name come up, it should have been a Mr. Class, just get your seatbelt on and have a nice day. Even if I got out of the vehicle, I said, well, Mr. Class, appreciate you getting out, but just put your seatbelt on and thanks and have a good. That's what it should have been. There should have been no checking the ID, because once you ran the tag, then you know. And these guys have seen me on video, because he said, I've watched your video. So he knows who I am by sight. And this is the whole thing. Once you know me by sight, then you know who I am, then you don't have any justification to sit down and break the law on my side of the fence. And I'm going to tell you that you're breaking the law. And once we start getting into this, it would be better just for you to back off and all this shake hands and we're correcting the problem here. But like I said, I got a slip, and I had no ability to be able to get it because it was in a glove box.
Yeah,
the paranoia that these guys are being put under and the pressure from up above, this is ridiculous that these guys are being put under this type of pressure and being this damn paranoid.
Well, when this whole incident happened and you got pulled over, I'm sure this guy didn't want to. Of course, he accused you of being the whole problem. But don't you recall, as you were telling me, Ron, that he got on the phone and he called in. That he got instructions from somebody up higher to take this to make a big thing out of this. So they obviously have some kind of a political thing happening here, and anytime you get, pulled over, they see this as an opportunity to, make you look like some kind of a complete idiot, when it's actually the opposite way.
Well, had I had my Jeep or my Excursion, it never would have happened, because they didn't recognize the car, and that's what I basically said. I didn't recognize the car. I didn't know it was you. Because my cars are tagged with Private Attorney General and Bounty Hunter. I have my wife's car, and that isn't on hers. But nevertheless, he ran the tag. It came back to me because that car's in my name.
Well, didn't he also make the statement to you, Ron, that when he found out who you were and who he had, that that you are considered to be what is it, quote unquote, a high profile person? Isn't that what he said?
Yeah, basically, a lot of flags fly up on me, and that him and the FBI have already had a lot of discussions on me and what I'm doing and what we're teaching here. And this is really coming down to an issue here of what we're teaching, because they can't find flaws. They're basically saying, well, this is your opinion, this is your thought. No, it isn't mine, because here's your written laws. Let's go back and read the interpretation of it.
Right.
That really doesn't mean, well, wait a minute, it either does or it doesn't.
As far as the FBI is concerned, they're here for one reason and one reason only. The FBI expects you to shut up, to sit down, and to obey. They're here to protect the status quo. That's the reason that they are here. And if you do anything outside of that, then what business does the FBI have talking to this highway patrolman at all?
Well, it goes back into with what we're doing here, because the teaching, even he admitted, he said, Rod, you're one of the best teachers that I've heard, and you're good at teaching. So it's the fact of what we're teaching here. We're actually teaching the annotated stuff. We're actually teaching people how to get in and read the law, but get the annotated version that has all the case sites, case laws, has the history, has the foundation of what that law was based off of. Get into the statutes at large. Get into the congressional records. Get into the historical side. So when you're walking in here and you're talking with knowledge, you're talking with understanding, and you're talking with clarity. Well, this is not what they're used to. This is where the problem's coming in, because they cannot combat their own documentation.
Yes, plus there's also something else going on, and I didn't have the opportunity to tell you, and I'll tell you on this phone call in front of everybody. I talked to a very high-ranking law enforcement officer, and he told me that he believes that this highway patrolman issued you the traffic citation because he believes really deep down inside everything you're saying is true, and he wants to see you destroy them. And, of course, that is precisely and exactly what's going to happen. When you get them in there, you're going to beat this. And when you beat them on this, you are going to be taking away so much power that they have. Because one of the things that's going to happen when you do beat them on this charge, and you are, Rob, you're going to beat them, then it's going to be out there, and they're going to know they have no authority to be charging people with obstruction.
That goes with all law enforcement here in this state. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to get into your local laws, get into the annotated, get into the historical, and look up the definitions of this stuff. Because what it purely says, if you just go by what it says resisting. If any person shall willfully and unlawfully resist, delay, or obstruct a public officer in discharging or attempting to discharge a duty of his office, he shall be guilty of a Class 2 misdemeanor. Okay, if you just go by that, well, that sounds, but you got to get down and read the history. What is obstruction? You got to get down into the annotated, and it tells you what obstruction is. And it isn't sitting here not putting your hands behind your back for a handcuff. It is not getting out of your car. That is not obstruction. There is rules and regulations on this thing. And ladies and gentlemen, you have to get into your annotated version and you have to get in and read the historical side of what is and what is not. But see, they leave the law so vague, and that's why they don't want you to be able to read. They don't want you getting into the historical side, because once you start getting into the historical side, then you can go back and prove all these laws wrong. And that's what's got them rattled with me, is we're coming back in saying, here's your history, this is the foundation, this is the intent. It's like that Second Amendment issue here in D.C. Supreme Court has ruled under Title 18-921. Title 18-921, it sits here and states that it only deals with an 18-inch or less sawed-off shotgun with barrels less than 18 inches, overall length less than 26. It only deals with a sawed-off shotgun, period. It doesn't deal with anything else. It isn't handguns. It isn't rifles. It only deals with Title 18-921 only has one function, and the Supreme Court has made the ruling, has made the decision. This is what it pertains to, and nothing else.
Yes, and as far as that particular statute goes, Rob, this is further proof of what you're saying, get to the annotated histories, because if you were to look at that particular statute, you would see things from their perspective, because hidden at the end isn't there a footnote that says the controlling legislation for this statute is the 1934 Firearms Act.
Exactly.
And yeah,
and this
so
is what they're taking out of context. So they're only reading what the statute said. If you just read that, you are. But when you get into the historical of what that statute actually refers back to and what it means, the whole thing is taken totally out of context.
If you go on to the North Carolina State General Assembly site and you look at, there is a disclaimer there that said that these statutes are not what the law is. They are an abbreviation. The code and statute is the legislative intent, Rod. That might be, you have to go to the archives. There's nobody that knows what the law is. The law in the entire statutory scheme is hidden. You've got to go to the legislative archives to find out, and that could be as many as 1,500 pages or 3,000, or
just 3 pages. It depends on what the legislation is.
Yeah, and to show you how, and to go ahead and say everything you're saying is true. I walked out of court one day, and a highway patrolman looked at me and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I had a copy of the annotated histories. And he says, "You're not supposed to even have that. What are you doing holding that? Who does that book belong to?" These guys don't think we even have the right to possess the annotated histories, because only the hallowed attorneys can have those.
Well, see, this goes right back in. The attorneys have the annotated, but what is out here is the service volume, which is just the short version of what the law is, but no history, no foundation of what the intent is.
Yeah, and that's how you can get some cop with an IQ of 83 that goes, "What do you mean? That's what the statute says. By God, can't you see it?" When he has no authority to be telling you what the statute has to say, because he can't take the stand and testify as to what the statute has to say. So, I mean, they're all totally, the whole system is just, it's out of control. Nobody knows what the law is. I mean, in order to find out what the law is, Rod, you've got to do a complete archives search. And that takes, time, energy, and expense.
Well, this is the whole thing. This is what has got them, is those of us who have time to do the research, and the fact that we're out on these calls and we have a lot of listeners and everybody out here, we're all working together to put this thing together. And that is what's the blessing about this show, is the amount of people that we are working together in order to expose. And this is why we hand this stuff out, because it isn't one person that's doing it. It's a multitude of people.
Absolutely. And I want to tell you, as far as an impact of what your show is having, you exposed the fact, and you are the guy that exposed the fact that handguns are not what? Firearms. I made them change. I didn't make them change. I just took your audio, gave it to all of them over here, and they had to change every actual sign in the county now. Every sign in the county has had to be changed. Every sign out there. But they weren't happy. But what they should be doing is saying, we appreciate you. Thank you. We didn't know any of this. But their whole attitude is, how dare you dare to even challenge us? That's the whole attitude that they have. They don't want to know what the real law is. They don't want to know what the truth is. And that is scary.
Well, see, this goes back into that American jurisprudence under 63C. As long as they are ignorant and they don't know, then they hold immunity. And the moment you start bringing that stuff up, their immunity goes right out the window.
Yes. They're all agents. They have no constitutional authority at all to be doing anything. It's just like you were saying. I mean, if you can find me anywhere in the organic constitution that mentions agencies, there isn't anything. We're talking about a unconstitutional, endless fourth branch of power out there that has destroyed everything.
Well, they have, and this is where, like I said, education on our side is where it comes in, because we've got to be more knowledgeable, better understanding. You know, like I said, the law enforcement, these guys are out here trying to do a job, and I do respect that, you know, but I also understand that when you're trying to explain the law to them and you're coming across, then they should take the hint. Well, maybe you know, and maybe we should just back off here, especially when you can sit down and explain it to them, and especially when they come, they know who you are, and they know, well, we've listened to you, and you know, you got a pretty good history here of what you're talking about. You know, this is where the issue comes in.
If anything did happen to you, Rod, and they did execute you, it would come out after that you were a one of these people that stirred up trouble. You were an instigator. You were this and you were that, and you're totally evil because you were doing doing all this. If they had executed you in that traffic stop, I guarantee you that officer that executed you would be in their way of looking at things a hero.
Well, I understand that, but I also understand he was real. Like I said, after we got done, he was nervous, and we had a conversation about this. And I said, we sure can. So like I said, I have no begrudging him. He's got a job to do, but like I told him, you do yours, and I'm going to do mine. You don't want no hard feelings on my side, then make sure you don't have any hard feelings on your side when I come back and do my job. But the thing is, like I said, the main topic is the fact that we're broadcasting of what you've seen and your friends seen in the Highway Patrol barracks. That these guys got orders to shoot.
They have orders to shoot and kill.
Yep. And that's what's important here, is they got orders to shoot and kill. And that is the issue here, that any type of resistance, like I said, the mere fact of bending over, getting a registration is a form of resistance, and that gives them justification.
Yeah.
This needs to really be calmed down here on their side of the fence.
Well, and the thing that they also consider is if you go in and look at what the annotated histories have to say, as far as they're concerned, you've got no right to do that, Rod. Only an attorney is able to do any of that. And you're looking at the annotated histories, Rod, and you don't know what they say. Only attorneys know what the annotated histories have to say. This is the attitude that these complete idiots have.
Well,
and I am personally sick of it. I'm sick of having our whole existences. I'm sick of these guys having the power. You're talking about guys who've got IQs of 83 to 100 running around and having the kind of power and control that they do, and having the authority at a traffic stop to execute you. That should terrify everybody. I mean, we have got to do something, people. We have got to do something, and we've got to do it in a hurry, or they are going to start, mark my word, they're going to start doing this often.
Well, how many bulletins have you sent over to me where they have already started it?
Oh, yes.
So it ain't something they're going to start. It's the fact that they have already started it. So what they're doing, now they're making the people paranoid to where they are now in fear of their life that they can be executed. Now you are actually creating a gun conflict out on the road. By them doing what they're doing, they've actually created a gun conflict.
Listen, people can say anything about you that they would like to say. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, Rod, that you are one of the most intelligent, honest men I have ever dealt with. And the fact that they would love to execute you speaks as to who they actually are. Plus, I want everybody else to know that you have stalled out the DC in that DC handgun case, which is huge. You've stalled them out. So all these people running around saying, oh, but Rod Class does this and Rod Class. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, Rod Class has stalled the DC court out. And Rod, you and I both know we found out stuff in that DC handgun case that you haven't even had the opportunity to get on the air and tell anybody about. It is mind-blowing.
Well, my other paperwork has hit here yesterday, so they've got all my documents. And like I said, the prosecution, he got his rebuttal, and we put in for squash because we went back and showed he had no corpus delicti, he had no standing on any of this, and then we went back in, did this ultra-virus on this, and that notice of felony. So there's another 5 documents in that went, and they have not posted them on the docket sheet, which is what they're supposed to. They're trying to sit down and see how to get at it, and this is one of the things that I was told is they're trashing a lot of the paperwork into the trash can, and it's hitting the shredder because, number one, they're sitting here saying that's my personal opinion, but it isn't a personal opinion when you're actually putting the laws in out of their book. It's the fact that they cannot answer it, and if they were to answer it, it would crucify them because they'd have to admit to their own fraud.
But not only fraud, they would have to admit the fact they're acting in treason.
Exactly.
And that, of course, is behind everything. Didn't that highway patrolman that stopped you, wasn't he very aware of the fact you had this ongoing, ongoing handgun thing happening?
Well, yeah, because we sit down, we talked about it. He talked about the ankle bracelet. I said, well, that's to keep me out of D.C. That's the only reason why I got it, is to keep me out of Washington, D.C. But the point being of it is, they are aware. They know who I am. They know what I do. But like you said, he's got a lot of respect for what I'm doing here. He said, I respect what you're doing. But they themselves, if you sit down and ask them, they themselves do not have an answer on how to fix the problem. They can't tell you to fix it. But that's the problem here. So it's better to sit back and do nothing and let the problem continue and not know how to fix it than have someone who comes in and starts coming in and says, okay, here's your rules, here's your regulations, here's your guidelines, here's your book. Why aren't you following this? Well, that is totally absurd. How dare you bring in my own rule book and show me my errors of what we're doing? That's too much of common sense here for me to sit down and read it and actually do my job right.
Right, and that's why this obstruction charge is one of the most important things that you've got going on, because once you defeat them on the obstruction charge, these highway patrolmen are going to see that they have not been told the truth, that they are totally misapplying with the laws. Highway patrolmen don't go and look at the annotated histories. First of all, they haven't got the IQ. Okay, they can't. I mean, and I know it's horrible. It's horrible to say that, Rod, but it's the truth. They don't care what.
The thing of it is, we've had several people that I know personally, and as for law enforcement, they're told not to go back and read these books. Yes. They're told don't read it because we don't want you to. We're going to tell you what to think. We're going to tell you we don't want you getting your mind cluttered. So don't go back and read any of this. And if they would actually take the time and go back and read the annotated and read the historical side, their guys are going to go, holy crap. But see, this is why, with what we had on one gentleman on the show, was sitting here saying that his one cousin went in, and because he had an IQ of 110, they would not allow him in because he had the ability to think and be able to read, and they don't want these guys to be able to read. They don't want them to be able to think outside the box, because once they start realizing, they start thinking, they're going back, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We're violating these people's rights. We're being told to commit criminal activities against these people. We're being told to violate their civil rights. And they don't want anybody who can think. They don't want somebody who can sit here and reason this thing out, because the moment they do, then they don't keep their job very long.
But see, here's where the fraud continues. When you go to court and you're charged with all these things, the DA should be dropping these charges instantly. But so it's not just the Highway Patrol that's in on this; it's the DAs. It's
well, the DA is the means. He's the money man to make sure that the corporation makes the money on all this. There was a gentleman that I just talked to here yesterday, and a young kid out in, I believe he said it was Arizona, New Mexico. He went in and he downloaded one of my documents, and he found my whole document. He didn't change a whole lot. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to, if you're going to download my information, at least change the names in this stuff.
Oh, gee, good Lord.
And, change the title, because you guys don't hold position as private attorney general and bounty hunter. Change, make it fit. No, but he postponed the court for 3 days, and the judge called him back in, and what the kid did, he walked up, he had a copy of his birth certificate. He threw it down and says, "This is what you want," turned around and walked out. And the DA sat down and says, "Your Honor, do you want me to arrest him?" And the judge says, "I don't have a warrant for him." So the fact that he threw down his birth certificate, again, we've heard this so many times. And when the DA said, "Do you want me to get a warrant?" He said, "Do you want me to arrest him?" And the judge said, "I don't have a warrant for him." So he got the birth certificate. This is what this all boils down to. It's that birth name.
Staggering. I mean, just, it's absolutely, and, I keep on asking you the question, do these guys understand it? Does the DA understand this? I believe the DA understands it. I believe they all understand this. Now, does some stupid, ignorant highway patrolman understand it? No. They don't have any kind of an idea. And,
well, in some ways, I would disagree with you on that, because I've talked to some of these guys that's been retired out, and whenever they ran across an incident, the first thing they bring up, do you got a warrant? You got a warrant to search me? You got a warrant for this? You got a warrant for that? If they know enough once they retired to have a warrant, then they knew while they was in office they had to have a warrant to do it to you.
Yes. Well, again, then they're obviously being told by their handlers. And, the question is, who are their handlers? In the case of North Carolina Highway Patrol, it's their chief lead counsel. And their chief lead counsel has gotten the Highway Patrol into, Rob, the Highway Patrol in these courts is just getting their behinds handed to them. They are violating so many people. It's unbelievable. And of course, and here's the problem, is that they're having to pay out. The Highway Patrol has caused the state to pay out all kinds of stuff. We have no idea as to how many, just millions of dollars, the state has had to pay out as a result of the Highway Patrol. It's staggering.
Well, see, the thing of it is, even when I got messed with the Dallas Police Department and County Sheriff Department and even this Highway Patrol, I have offered these guys to come down here to the house, an open invitation to come down, and I'll sit down and I'll talk with you, and let's go through this stuff. Because you guys really need to understand, and you need to know what is. Now, and let's sit here and talk. If you're telling me that I'm wrong, let's go through it, and you show me where I'm wrong. But if you cannot show me where I'm wrong, and we're going through the definitions, and we're going through the annotated stuff, we're going through the historical, and you're going, holy crap. If I'm wrong, then show me. If I'm not wrong, then you're getting an education here, and that is what this is all about. It's about educating these guys as well as the other population out here. Because these are the guys that really need the education level. They're the ones who really need to understand this. Because these guys are risking their lives out here, and the Bar Association doesn't give a crap because these guys are worth a dime a dozen. They're just replacing them with somebody else. They don't care. These guys are nothing more than pawns.
And that's why I think one of the things we're going to have to do is put in counterclaims against not only the highway patrolmen, the highway patrol, but the DAs also. You know, if you can show the DAs what the annotated histories are and show them that there is voluminous amounts of case law, and they go ahead anyway, they're violating their own holy codes and their own holy codes. And I mean, they don't care. This is why you got to bring in the ultra-virus violation and counterclaim on some of this stuff. Because once you bring in the ultra-virus misbehavior on this, and you bring in this stuff, and you bring it, now you're showing the judge where the DA has intentionally went out of his way to commit fraud upon the court. And if the judge doesn't do anything, now the judge becomes part of that fraud. Yeah, and I think how many hundreds of people across the state, Rod, are being charged on obstruction? Do you ever hear once of any bar card agent getting these cases dropped by putting in the annotated histories? No.
Well, they can't, because the moment they do, they would sit here and they'd lose their bar card. And this is one of the things that I've had several different times where people have come up, and my wife got pressured here the other day about where did I get my law degree? And there's pushing, did I go to college? Am I a lawyer? Was I a lawyer? Was I a paralegal? Where's my law degree? Where did I get my law degree from? And ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a law degree. I got a 12th grade education. My education was in auto mechanics.
They are, I mean, do you realize how ignorant that is? These guys believe that the only people that know what the law is some idiot attorney that's gone and gotten paid $300,000 for legal education. And when they get out of school, Rob, they don't know anything. And that's one of the things I think gets these guys also. You know, who is this guy who is, he's got a high school education? How dare he? And then when they find out that you're telling them the whole truth and nothing but the truth, they're starting to think, why did I pay $300,000 to go to school when this guy can clean my clock?
And this is the whole thing. And when these guys, the college that they go to, because I have had, like Karen Huda, she flat out said she was never taught law. She was never taught or university. She was taught theory and concept. The two attorneys up there in D.C. one went to Harvard. Now, where the other one went, but they both sat here and said they were never taught law. They was taught theory and concept. I've had attorneys that I've sit here and talked to on the side, and they'll tell you they're not taught law. They're only taught theories.
Well, don't you recall, Rob, the first attorney that you had? She went to Harvard.
Yeah.
She went to Harvard, and she was astounded that we knew any of this stuff. She was absolutely flabbergasted that we knew any of this stuff. And how long did she stay before she just dropped off the face of the earth?
She only had me for 2 weeks, and she dropped off after 2 weeks of dealing with me. She was gone.
And we still don't know where she is.
But the point being of it is, when you talk to her about driver's license, she admitted you don't need a driver's license.
Yes, and she admitted that the entire court system had been overthrown and that they were operating under administrative. But she was astounded that we knew any of that. See, the whole thing is, Rod, is that you are a little person, and little people aren't supposed to know these things, you see. This is the whole attitude that they have. She had been in the public defender's office. How long had she been there, Rod? For
11 years.
An 11-year period of time. 11-year period of time that she gets assigned to your actual case, and the next thing we know, after an 11-year period of time, she drops off the face of the earth completely. Don't you think that's odd?
Well, yeah, and this after being with me for 2 weeks, she got out.
Oh yeah.
Because she knew that I knew more than she did.
Well, I think one of the things that happened is that she probably said, listen, this guy is going to clean our clocks. Or the other thing that might have happened is they might have just taken her and placed her some other place in a hurry.
Well, the point being of it is it's like I said, what we're being taught out here is a serious issue because we're not being taught the law, but we're being held accountable for something we're not being taught. And these guys who have got law degrees don't know the first thing. And if you get back in with what I just read here, basically that's theory in law. That's the theory under this resisting officer. That's the theory. That's the concept. But you got to get into the annotated to pull up the real meaning and the real meat of this. And this is something that they don't want you to do. They don't want you pulling in the meat of this, of the intent and the purpose of it. This is where the issue is.
That's absolutely staggering. And why don't we have access to any of that? Why aren't the annotated histories out there? And the answer is because they don't want you to know what the real law is.
That's the whole thing. They're keeping it a secret from us. And what I read here today, I was at the doctor's office with my granddaughter. She pulled out a historical book. Back in 213 BC. Back in 213 BC, Chinese leaders started burning books because they did not want the people to know. They did not want them educated. They didn't want them to know anything because if they started understanding, they start getting educated, then they could sit down and see what was wrong. What did Hitler do?
Oh, yeah.
He burnt books because he didn't want the people to know. He didn't want the people to learn. He didn't want people educated. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what they're doing today. They are getting rid of these books. They are hiding this stuff. They are literally disposing of them because they don't want us educated. They don't want us to understand. As long as we're kept in the dark and as long as we're ignorant, ignorance is bliss. And when we start bringing this stuff up, and that's why it's getting harder and harder and harder to come across these books because they're getting rid of them to where it's not out here for public access. So if you don't have the historical side of any of this, then you don't have a defense.
Yeah, but Rod, don't you remember me telling you about the fact that in Buncombe County I went to the 11th floor and they have a historical law library up there that was just unbelievable. And I went up there one day and they were throwing away every book that you could think about. And all of them mysteriously were books before 1938. I wonder how come. And I said, can I get a few of these books? They said, no, we'd love to give them to you, but we're under orders from the state to destroy all of them. And they destroyed all of them. And even the bar card agents in the Buncombe County were sitting there, why is this happening? And the answer that they were actually given is all the law you need to know will be on the computer.
And that lays off all the annotated stuff. That lays off everything. The only thing you're going to read is what the section says, and no history, no foundation of it.
In all the cases before 1938, you start putting in cases prior to 1938, and these guys flip out.
Well, that goes back into we actually had common law back at that time. But yeah, this is the fact that they're burning these books. Again, they're doing it secretly, but it goes right back in. They're burning knowledge. They don't want you to know.
Yeah, it's absolutely staggering. And of course, one of the things that burns me is that we have people sitting in these 501c3 corporate churches out there. They're saying, well, you must obey them. God has put them there over you. How many times has God said, my people perish because they don't understand what the truth is? These public officials are not acting under some edict. I mean, they are breaking the law completely, and they have the complete support of the educational system, which indoctrinates them, and the churches.
Well, like I said, it goes back in. People need to wake up and they need to understand, because there's no place in the Constitution that I have found under Article 1, Section 8, Congress only has jurisdiction over commerce and foreign affairs. It does not give it over the people, and that's the same thing with the state constitution. It only can deal with commerce. It deals with commercial activity. It does not have authority over the people.
Well, I think one of the whole things that's absolutely staggering, it's not emphasized as much as it should be. These guys have no Article 6, here, they have no Article 6, Section 7, North Carolina Constitutional Oath. They're holding no offices. There's no office holders. I mean, this should scare people to death. I've gone in there before and said, Your Honor, you have no Article 6, Section 7, North Carolina Constitutional Oath. You're not holding a office. Therefore, you're not entitled to sit up there. And it's the truth and the whole truth, and they don't want to address any of it. That's how far out of control it is. They have no state constitutional obligation to any of us.
Well, no, they don't. But see, that goes right back in what we talked here the other day on that couple of them. There's case laws that the United States versus Pee Wee Coal Incorporated, and that Van Colt, that K-O-T-E-X, Cotex case law. All right. What this gets into, it shows that the state owns you literally. The state literally owns you. They own all your property. So if they're going to drag you in, then they have to also name the state as a defendant in the case.
Yes.
And they're not doing this. They're giving you an attorney, but that attorney is not coming in here as the state.
Wow.
Because there's some issues here on that. And like I said, we've got case law, and I put it out the other night, and I got some emails back on Skype. The guy said, yeah, if you put this together, actually, the state has to name itself as a defendant because they own the name. They own the issue here. They own it. So they have to name themselves as a defendant. And he's right.
Unbelievable. Absolutely. Well, it's just like when you went into court and when you went into United States Federal Court and they didn't know what a corpus delicti was, and you submitted an IRS case from an IRS agent where he had a corpus delicti hearing.
Exactly right. You know, and an IRS agent got off because there was no corpus delicti on paying taxes. There's no injured party.
And then they had the audacity, Rod, to order up a forensic psychological profile on you.
Well, that's fine, because what they did is they just now proven that I hold equal standing in them in understanding the law without having a law degree. Now, that puts them in pretty bad shape, because if I have the understanding of the law and they got a law degree and they don't, now who's incompetent?
Absolutely. And, of course, I was telling you the story about us going into court the other day and finally hammering them so hard where they came clean and admitted that the injured party, the actual corpus delicti, is the state and the code and the statute. The statute, they admitted, Rob, the statute has been injured. You can't injure a statute.
Oh, well, okay, let's go with that, Rob. Let's sit here and say, okay, I will agree with you. The statute is a corpus delicti. The statute is injured. Now, because your prosecutor did take an oath to uphold the Constitution and uphold the laws, he has now committed perjury in this courtroom. He's now violated statute. So now, because of his ultra-virus misbehavior of his office, before you could try me, we now got to try him. Because he violated the statute, and the statute is a corpus delicti. You just made that ruling.
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely. It's just, when is it going to ever end?
That's the whole point. You see, that's what they sit here and told us in D.C. It's the statute that is that damaged party. And that's what they said here in the state. It's the statute. Well, then they cannot violate the statute bringing you into court, because the moment they violate the statute, they have now created the injury here. They committed a felony. So now their felony has to be heard before they drag you in, and they can't bring another prosecutor in against you, because every time they bring one in, he walks in with dirty hands. And through the poison tree, he's violated statute, so it's going to be a never-ending battle of prosecuting prosecutors.
I'll tell you something. You know, it's just like I was telling you the other day. They are not trying to even hide it now. At this point in time, they're going, yeah, the statute has been injured. Well, excuse me, I think what's necessary here is that you have a psychological forensic study ordered up on you. Because if you believe that statute can be injured, then you have some severe psychological issues here.
Okay, but now let's go back in. Let's see who the statute applies to. Let's go back and read your definition of what it says. It says person, to be construed to mean a corporation, an association, a firm, a trust, an estate. Okay, now I want you to sit here and I want you to apply this to the flesh and blood. How does this apply to the flesh and blood, and how can the flesh and blood violate a policy of a corporation?
Yeah. Rod, and I've said it before, I think the most staggering thing is that we have allowed them to control us and rule us under a corporate bylaw and separate us from our heritage, which is the Anglo-Saxon common law. It's an eye for an eye and it's a tooth for a tooth. And this goes to show you how ignorant all of us are, that we have allowed ourselves to be ruled under a statutory scheme. And all you need to know about the statutory scheme is it applies to the actual persons that you're talking about, corporations and trusts, dead things, or creations of the evil empire. And we have allowed.
But again, it's our ignorance come down to the fact that we trusted these people, that they were doing their job right. And at that particular time, we were not aware of the language difference of terminology of words.
Yeah.
Okay, because we came in there with honor when it says no person, and we sat down and we came in there with honor. But when we started reading, it says the word person is to be construed to mean this, and this. Now, wait a minute. The word person, that word, it means it is to be construed to have this meaning, not flesh and blood, not human being. When you see this word, it is to be construed to mean this over here. Well, that dawned on some people. Nobody really got in here and started explaining it and laying it out to the people. That's what we've been doing here. When you read it, this is what this word means. And I'm going to pull it up here on this one document that I have, because this is very vital because the way it is worded in the text, it starts out, because when you first read this, it throws you. But when you really understand how to read, it says the word person and whomever includes. Now think about it. The word person and whoever includes corporations, companies, association, firms, partnerships, societies, and joint stock companies, as well as individuals. But we're going to get into the word individual. But the word person and whomever includes. But it doesn't tell you what a person is. So now when you come down in and you start getting into some of these other sections of the word person, okay, Title 26, under Subtitle F, Chapter 79, 7701, definition, person. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, an estate, a partnership, an association, a company, or a corporation. Now, let me pull up the word individual, because this is what's important here, because we're going to get into this. Under Title V, okay, now Title V, ladies and gentlemen, is government organization. Title V is government organization. It's administration. It has nothing to do with you and I. This is purely administration. And it says the term person or the term individual means a citizen of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence. A citizen of the United States is a lower C citizen. Now, wait a minute. Let's stop and think here. Look at the map, and you will see North America, Central America, and South America. You will not see the word United States, North America, United States, Central America, United States, South America. You only see the word North America, Central America, and South America. This is America. If you go in and you look at the 40 boundary stones in the District of Columbia for the survey plot, on those stones, and it is engraved in stone, it is chiseled in the stone, and it says, boundary stones of the District of Columbia, jurisdiction of the United States, on one side. On the back side, it has Maryland and has Virginia. They do not consider Maryland and Virginia United States. That's not me saying it. It's on the stone. It's engraved. So when that word individual under Title V comes under government organization, when it's talking citizen, it is talking those within the United States, within that 10-mile square, or those who hold public office under the 14th Amendment. And the alien resident coming in, what are they required to do before they get their citizenship? What's an alien resident required to do when they get citizenship, Art?
Well, they're required to go through a training program where they have to know about the entire history of the Constitution. They have to know all that. It takes about in order to do it properly, it takes about a 7 years, I think, right?
But what else? What's the end result in order to get their citizenship?
I don't know. I'm drawing a blank here.
Don't they have to raise their right hand and take an oath?
They have to raise their right hand and take a oath.
To the Constitution. Yes, they do. Because if you ask anybody who becomes a citizen, it is a requirement that they raise their hand and they take an oath of office to the Constitution.
Right, and they're not a citizen of the United States. They're a citizen of the United States of America. And when they go across, they're told in order to hold unemployment that they have to have a socialist slave ID. They are told to go across the street, and miraculously, they're transformed from a citizen of the United States of America to a U.S. citizen.
And this is, like I said, this Title V under 552A, the term individual means a citizen of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Right there tells you what an individual is. It's not John Q. Public.
How dare you? How dare you read this stuff? You're a domestic terrorist, Rod.
That's what they keep telling me.
I mean, this is just, it's now reached the point where it's absolutely absurd. But before we can change anything, we're going to at least have to get 3% of the population where they have a functional understanding. And I think it's beginning to happen.
It is. Okay, under Title 27, CFR, and Title 27 is Administrative Codes, 72.11, meaning of terms, person, an individual, trust, an estate, partnership, association, company, or a corporation. The meaning of terms, a person, is an individual, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. Up in Title 26, 6331, levy and districts. If any person liable to pay any tax negates or refuses to pay the same within 10 days after notice and demand, it shall be lawful for the Secretary to collect such taxes and such sums as shall be sufficient to cover the expense of the levy, by levying upon all property and rights to the property, except such property as exempt under 6334, belonging to such person, or within their levy provided in this chapter for payment of taxes. Levy may be made against the actual salary and wages of officers, employees, or elected officials of the United States, the District of Columbia. So that word person, an individual, falls back into that 10-mile square.
Yeah, it's a complete overthrow. As far as for any of the autonomy and sovereignty of several states, the autonomy and the sovereignty of the several states has been overthrown.
But see, this is where coming back in and understanding the terminology, reading their books, getting into the annotated. Once you start reading this, it puts a whole different twist to what the law says, because that's the theory, that's the concept. That's not the actual law. That's just a short version. You have to get into the historical side of this and start bringing this. And this is what's got these guys rattled and upset, is that we're actually coming back in and doing this, and we're sitting here putting the pieces together and saying, whoa, wait a minute. So when they're sitting here saying, well, you figure the law don't apply to you. Okay, let's go back and read the definitions. Let's read what I just read here. I want you to sit here. I want you to show me, here's the history, here's the foundation. Show me. How does it apply to me? I'm not saying that don't. You're the one that's sitting here saying, well, you don't. You said it. Don't. No, I'm sitting here saying, here's the information. Show me how it applies to me. And they can't.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question, Rod. What happens if you got, for all these people that believe that, that you can still, contact your, local representatives and your congressmen, and if you engage in the two-party system and you vote, that something can happen. To anybody that believes that, it's the most staggering thing I've ever heard. What happens if you were to contact, though, your state representatives and have them put a bill in the House where it was mandated that they had to put the entire annotated histories out there? What do you think would probably happen?
Well, first off, you wouldn't get a local representative that would even do that, because they're bar attorneys. And the other one, if you was to get a non-bar attorney, he would have to go to his legal authority to get permission from him to come back and do this, which creates another problem here, because I have talked to too many of these representatives that were not bar agents, but were actually doctors or, real estate people, and the first words out of their mouth is, well, I have to go to my legal authorities.
Oh, yeah.
No. I did not elect them. I elected you. You are the legal authority here, not your law firm.
Yes. And plus, if you had the annotated histories out there, what would that do? That would put every bar card agent out. And we can't have that. We must have the whole system ruled by a private, elite fraternity. That is, as you know, Ron, is the whole evil. I mean, this is the reason we are now finding ourselves in the position that we are, because we're being ruled by an elite group of people who don't want to know what the truth is. They want to simply tax and enslave all of us.
Well, that's the whole thing. That's where the problem is. And that's why with what we have to do, we have to get better educated. We got to be able to speak better. We got to have more knowledge. We got to be able to walk their stuff in and lay it down and say, all right, here's the rule book. Because now what you're doing, you're putting a political question before the court. Because once you put that political question of legislation, now they got a problem here, because they don't have power to legislative here. They may have power for interpretation or concept or theory, but when you actually put the real law before them, they technically have a real issue here, because this really comes into legislative terminology.
Don't be the least bit surprised if we keep on putting in what the real law is through the annotated histories. If they don't give us access to these annotated histories, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised about that at all.
Well, no, they're trying to keep us out of the law libraries to start with, and in order for you to order some of these books, they're starting to get stricter and stricter. They want your firm's name and address.
Oh, yeah.
For them to get this out to John Q. Public, you still can, but there's some of them that are getting a little squirrely here about getting it out to John Q. Public.
Well, I'm telling you, that's exactly what's going to happen, because we've been hitting them so hard with what the annotated histories are. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if we see all the annotated histories. You can't get your hands on them, and when that happens, and I'm telling you, it is going to happen, and probably, unfortunately, Rod, you're one of the biggest actual reasons that's going to happen. Once that happens, we really are in deep, we really have some deep problems.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Now, like I said, we've got to expose with what we're doing here. We have to. We got to bring in the annotated. We got to bring in the historical side, and that's what's really got them more upset. And bringing in the American jurisprudence, bringing in their foundation of their job description, because the more we can expose what their job is and how they're violating their job, they're running out of avenues to go back and play because their side has never done it.
No, these guys, they don't put in annotated histories. They don't do anything. And if you can't get an attorney to do any of this, boy, you are going to, pay like you've never paid in your life.
Yeah, that's it.
It's just something has got to be done, and it's got to be done in a hurry. And people are going to have to get pro.
Well, wait a minute, Art. All right, go ahead, Art. I'm sorry. I hit here. I got a lot of chatter on the board trying to.
People are going to have to get as proactive as they can. They're going to have to stop looking at TV. They're going to have to get off their behinds. They're going to have to do something in a hurry, and they're going to have to stand behind what you've got happening. And because if we don't, I'm telling you, all these annotated histories, all of our access to the complete law is going to go completely, and that's going to be the next step. You mark my word, Rod. That's going to be the next step. They don't want you to know any of this.
Well, no, they don't. That's where the problem's coming in. They don't want us to know, and that's why they're trying to get rid of the books. Because once we start coming in knowledgeable, like I said, this goes right back in that 213 BC, where China started burning books because the emperor did not want the people to be able to learn and know what was going on, to be able to come in and overthrow him. They didn't want him to know they didn't want the people to know what the rules are. This is what Hitler did. And this is what they're doing now with these law books in these libraries. They're burning them. They are turning them out, and they are sending them over to the incinerators, and they're having them burnt.
Yes, yeah, and you're absolutely correct. Behind every officer out there, whether it's the clerk of court or whether it's a congressman or whoever it is, they all have handlers, Ron. And who are the handlers? They're the bar agents are handling everybody.
You can't go to any of these people that they don't have to go to. They're not capable of thinking on their own. They're not capable. We can't give legal advice. We can't give legal advice. Well, wait a minute. You're holding a public office here. I'm coming in here. You're supposed to be able to answer my questions. So what this is down to is this. Now when you're being pulled over and you're being given your Miranda, well, do you understand? No, I can't, you can't give me legal advice, and I can't answer because if the laws doesn't mean what they say, now I can't give a legal advice here, whether I can answer you or not. That's really what it's coming down to, is we can't give a legal answer whether we understand the law, because that's a legal answer. That's a legal issue.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's just absolutely staggering. And you would think that all of us out here would have kind of, at least should be holding hands, all of us should be, and getting these issues, immediate issues, addressed. But if you were to go to a congressman and talk about, listen, I want you to propose a bill out there where all of the annotated histories are out there for the average person to get their hands on, they'd throw us out of the office.
Okay, what it would take is we'd have to get a petition up. We'd have to get so many names on a petition to have a bill put before the legislator. For one person to go in and do it, they wouldn't do it. But if we were to get a petition, and I don't know, we got to go down and find out how many names would have to be on it, and get it signed, and then put this before Congress. And what we need to do is do it in one area, so that congressman, it's going to be his colleagues or his constituents, that if he does it, he won't have a job next time.
Yeah, that'd be an excellent idea. But you happen to know as well as I do that one of their arguments are going to be we can't have legally untrained people interpreting what the law is. And as the actual Presidente said, only attorneys, and he had the audacity to say this. The President said only attorneys can understand what the Constitution had to actually say. Can you believe the arrogance of that?
Yeah, this is the whole mentality. This is where the problem's coming. It's like I sit down and I talk to the statey. He said, well, Rod, I can't give you legal advice. I said, you just did the moment you wrote me up a ticket. You sit down and said I had to have a seatbelt on. That's legal advice.
Yeah.
You know, if you ask him, do I have to have a seatbelt? Well, that's legal advice. And you can't write me up for having a seatbelt because that's legal advice.
How many times have you and I both talked to these public officials, and that's the first thing they said, I can't give you legal advice, and they're terrified. They are terrified of this.
Well, this is the problem, Art. You know, these people are old, and they're being told by the Bar Association, don't give advice, don't talk, keep your mouth shut. The plausible deniability. Well,
I think one of the things that needs to happen is the original 13th Amendment needs to be out. We need to get that, and every state needs to adopt that thing. And Rod, we both know who and what the problem is.
Okay, I got into this with a gentleman here the other day. Article 1, Section 9, and it's the last clause. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept of any present in the office or title of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state. It flat out tells you right there in Article 1, Section 8, or in Section 9. So it's already in the Constitution. The Bill of Rights, the amendment of 13th, it gets into a little more detail, but it point blank tells you right under the Constitution, no titles of nobility to hold office.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be any more plain and simple. Actually, Rod, I'm sitting here holding in my formerly nicotine-stained hands a copy of the first moving court document that a bar card agent has ever drafted up in this state for a 15A 922C, is what you know is objection to trial by citation, right?
Yep.
Rod, the whole thing is captioned in parentheses, big parentheses around the entire moving action. You and I both know that means it doesn't apply at all. I'm going to scan this in and I'm going to show it to you. And if people have any doubts at all about who and what attorneys are, and so I'm sitting here holding this in my hand, and Rod, we're going to launch a bar complaint on this guy. And of course, this is the whole thing. He was so stupid that he thought these people will never understand this. Well, they're absolutely incorrect, and this attorney has underestimated us, and he's going to be receiving bar complaints, and he's probably going to get into a tremendous amount of trouble. If it's too good to be true, it's true. Now, I was so happy to know that this is the first moving court action where a bar agent has actually objected to a trial by citation. Yes. And I mean, that is huge from the standpoint that that's all you have to do is object to the trial by citation, and it destroys everything. And I should have known there was going to be something underhanded. I'm going to scan this thing in, and I promise you, whoever this agent is going to be in big trouble. And when this happens, they're going to all sit back and go, you know something, we have underestimated these people. And they're going to come unglued. I promise you. And one of the things they're going to do is just what we were talking about, saying this has gone too far, and they're going to probably destroy the annotated histories, not destroy them. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they destroyed them. I'd really be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
They're certainly going to try to cut off any more legal understanding that we have.
Well, this is what they're doing here. Like I said, we need to get that, but get that over to me, because that's another thing that we can put back in, because they can't drag you in on a citation, because the citation is not a chargeable offense.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, they won't even use something that's been there for ages. I mean, there it is. It appears in their own holy codes and holy statutes, and they won't even put it in. How come they won't? Because if they put in a proper objection to trial by citation, what would happen to them? They'd be in big trouble.
Well, they wouldn't be able to turn over the profit, but they use it for their own defense, but they won't use it to defend their client.
Absolutely. And they don't want to talk about the fact that a citation is not a charging instrument. They don't want to talk about that. The citation has to be a proper charging instrument, because they have to be able to, as you said, turn a profit.
Well, that's it. Okay, we've been on it for a little better than 2 hours here, and my granddaughter come out. I just got some email for her homework, so we got to get started on her homework.
I've got to go also. It's been an honor, Rod. It's been a complete honor.
Well, like I said, Art, like I said, with what you're doing up here in part of North Carolina, what I'm doing down here, the fact that they had to change all the firearm signs over up in your area, the fact that you're walking in into the State Highway Patrol barracks, and they've got signs in there, sit down, say, anybody that resists, shoot them, execute them. This is information that we need to get out, because, like I said, these guys, they're being pressured, and they should not be put under this type of pressure in order to do this.
Yes.
Because bottom line boils down to, they start doing this, and they're going to end up losing these guys, because they're going to end up shooting each other. But on the other hand, if this is standard operating procedure, they're going to have more issues out on the street.
And if I can leave everybody with this thought too, as you're saying, I'm doing a whole bunch of things to educate people. You're doing them, but look at us, Rod. We both have had handguns on us, and I mean, we might not even be here. But people are going to have to start stepping up to the plate. They're going to have to start doing something. It has now gone to the point that they are literally going to start taking the opportunity, and with all the evidence and proof that we have tried to explain on this call, if people don't step up to the plate, then I'm going to tell you something. They are going to literally start at traffic stops executing all of us.
Well, like I said, you've already put out enough information that you're sitting here showing where they're doing it anyhow.
Yeah.
They're doing it anyhow. And this gentleman out of Texas here, he brought up the video that was on TV of a security guard, the captain telling the guy, the guy was told if he moved, they would shoot him, and the captain said, you can get up now, and they shot him. So, the fact that they're doing it, and it's all over, this is where the issue's at. They are actually doing this. It's just that we're not seeing a lot of it on TV because they don't want to broadcast it.
Gosh. If the people that listen to this call, if you're out there and you're listening to this call, please help us. Please, somebody out there, get off your dead behinds, because if it very well could be you or somebody that you know, or some member of your family that's going to do the wrong thing at a traffic stop, say the wrong thing, and then it's going to be over. And when they say, "Oh, now that's not going to happen. We don't do that." As you just got through saying, Rod, it's being done all over the place.
It was back in, 2005, 2004. There was a book out, and we got up in Cleveland at a bookstore. And it talked about all the killings out on the street done by police officers. And from what the book showed, there was between 250,000 to 300,000 people killed in 1 year by police officers for no excuse, no reason, just shot down.
Right.
And that all 50 states. So you sit down and figure 250,000 to 300,000 in 1 year. That's a lot of people.
Well, the staggering thing is since the World Trade Center bombings, 5,000 people have been gunned down by by officers out here, which are more people than died in the entire Iraqi war conflict on our side. 5,000 people.
So, you know, it isn't a thing that it's going to happen, or it's already here. They're just not broadcasting it out on the news of unarmed civilians being shot.
Yeah, which is, I mean, you probably live in a town of what, 5,000? Do you live in a town of 5,000?
Oh, yeah, at least. I bet it's probably close to 20,000.
Well, there are lots of little places that's still out there that have, you know, a town of 5,000, town of 6,000. That's the equivalent of a whole town full of people being executed.
Yeah,
executed.
My neighborhood, we got about 700 people in my neighborhood, but if you're talking, you know, Gastonia, Dallas, you're talking maybe about 40, 50,000 people. But yeah, you're talking a whole community being wiped out.
And the fact that we have allowed this to happen and it's going on, this is becoming almost standard operating procedure.
Well, this is coming down to genocide. That's what it boils down. It's genocide.
I will leave you with this story. There was a guy, and he had psychological problems, and he was on the front porch of his house, and he had his children out there, and these cops, and this actually happened here. The guy wasn't hurting anybody. Now, he did have a handgun on him, but he wasn't threatening anybody with a handgun. They were talking to this guy, and the first opportunity they had, they took their handguns, blew his head literally off of his shoulders in front of his children. The children were sprayed and literally covered with this, and the cop gets away with all of it. And how many times do we see this happening, that they come out to the house because they've been called for a domestic thing? And they come out there and they do get your domestic problems straightened out. You have no more domestic problems when they take a gun and they execute you. The other day, I think it was down in South Carolina, Rod, wasn't there a young man who was just, didn't the cop, he was called out to the house, the young man had some psychiatric problems, and the cop literally said, I don't have time to deal with this. Took out the gun and shot him.
I think he was a veteran, but yeah, this is what they're doing to veterans. They don't deal with veterans coming back in from Iraq. They just shoot them.
Yeah, I don't have time to deal with this problem. So he pulls out the gun and he shoots him. Or how about the other day, and I think I sent you the email on this one, two people were in a car, and the car backfired. The car backfired. The cops chased this guy into an alley and executed them, put 122 shots because the car backfired.
Like I said, it isn't going to come. It's already here. They're doing it.
I mean, and the fact that we have set back and we are not asking for these guys to be, and I'm going to have to be very careful about what I actually say here, but the fact that we're allowing this to happen because we're not doing anything, we're not standing up and saying, no, you can't do this. But the fact of the matter is that's not happening, and now as a result of it not happening, then we see this going on daily, day after day. People literally being executed. Executed because your car backfired.
Well,
unbelievable.
Well, again, part of the problem is this. The news media does not broadcast this. They broadcast, he was in fear of his life. He thought it was this. He's in fear. He's in fear. They're not coming out here reporting the truth, and they're not reporting 99% of what's going on out here.
There was they did, however, report something the other day. There was an off-duty cop, and he lived across the street from these other people, and their pit bull terrier was out there. And the cop felt the pit bull terrier was a threat to him. And he's an off-duty cop now. Takes out his gun, and kills the animal doesn't even have the common courtesy to go over and to tell them, I'm sorry, but I had to execute your dog because I was afraid. Didn't do any of that. Now, Rod, here's the thing about this whole case. It's unbelievable. This officer got in a massive amount of trouble. He got into so much trouble because he executed a pit bull. We care more about pit bulls than we will do more for animals than we're going to do for our own flesh and the blood. It's staggering.
But, Bart, if you go back and read the law under Title VII, under agriculture, under Section 136, we got animal rights out here. Not human beings, right? Not flesh and blood. Because even the word human being is classified as an animal. So they don't care about the flesh and blood. It's the animal rights that is protected out here under the statutes.
Yeah. I mean, they jerked that cop up and got him. He is into so much trouble because he shot an animal. Well,
like I said, it's really a screwed up system with what's going on out here. But no, we need to educate people. I appreciate you coming in, telling your story, and having your friend here telling the story of what's going on here. But people, this is reality. This is every day what's going on. But it's not being broadcasted that much on CNN or local news. If they do, well, they are putting the people out to where they are psychologically imbalanced, and this gives justification. If you actually knew the truth about any of this is where the issue is coming in. They are forcing the people into self-defense. Now, we're trying to sit down and reason and educate. And Benjamin Franklin once stood here and said, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I have been proving this so far is because the pen, the documentation has created more problems and more hassles on their side than anything that I have done with my self-protection of my rifle and my pistol. I have not shot anybody with these, but you sit down and look at the paperwork that I've done, that terrifies them more than me sitting here pulling out a pistol and a rifle.
Yes, and you brought a whole federal court to a screeching halt.
So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, education is where we're at here. We all have to get better educated and be more knowledgeable in this stuff. And it's going to take us to fix it. And the more of us that start doing it, the system's going to have to change. It's going to have to. And the education on these guys out on the street is going to have to come up because they're going to have to be better educated. But they're going to start learning on this. And they're going to start realizing, because I have talked to several officers that has retired out because they started realizing, and they just retired because, I want to find another job here because we're being lied to and we're being frauded, and it isn't worth this. It isn't worth our life because we're being lied to.
They're going to start taking people off and putting them in FEMA concentration camps. As a matter of fact, I received a call from a guy when I came home last night. And he'd just been on a huge conference call. And guess who the topic of the conference call was about? It was about you.
Oh.
It was about you. A huge, one of these huge conference calls. And he says they have absolute concrete evidence that people now who are being homeless are being dragged off to FEMA concentration camps.
Yep, that's what they was doing down here in South Carolina. They gave the people 3 days down here in Atlanta. Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they gave them 3 days to get off the street, or they're just going to put them in jail.
Yes, and they put you in a FEMA concentration camp, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they then take the opportunity to perform some kind of a genetic experiment on you, or and the fact that people can't think this is happening, it has happened, and it is going to continue to happen. I would remind you, Rod, about, don't you remember all the people that were in the Houston Astrodome after the Katrina thing?
Yep.
There were thousands of people in the Houston Astrodome. A lot of those people literally dropped off the face of the earth. A lot of them did. And there's no telling what has. Of course, they dropped off the face of the earth after the government stole a tremendous amount of the property. And,
well, get back into the concentration camps in Germany, they had gas chambers. They sit down and they had incinerators. So they just gassed them and incinerated them.
yes, and don't you recall when they had to answer for that, what they had to say? I'm so sorry I had to kill those Jews, but I was just following orders.
That's it. I think deals with following orders, you know, and they got, you know, it's going to be a while, but it can happen. But the more people start waking up and start addressing this, but we've had talked to people that was in Russia, sat down saying what they're seeing in this country happened 50 years ago in Russia. They're seeing the same thing coming in. We've talked to people that was in Germany about Hitler. They're seeing the same thing coming in this country. What happened in Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, it's what went over there is what we was over there fighting is coming in our backyard.
It's here.
It's here. It's in our backyard.
Just following orders, Rob. Well, listen, it's been a complete honor, pal.
Okay, thanks,
you,
Kurt.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, this was about 2 hours and 24 minutes. And we got into the history of the State Highway Patrol here, where these two guys walked in and actually seen on the commander's door, giving orders for the Highway Patrol, anybody who resists to shoot them, and don't think twice. This is what the conversation was on the last two shows. Be careful out here, ladies and gentlemen. Be very, very careful. Because these guys are you know, they're being given orders. They're being hyped by the Bar Association that, you know, anybody that resists is anti-American or anti-government. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not anti-government. We're not anti-American. We are the Americans, and we are the government. These people who are in office only have these offices for short terms. They're not a permanent lifetime job for them. They got to be elected. They got to be put into office. These are employees, and what we have here is a labor management dispute. We are management. They're labor. They come to us, they ask for jobs. They want us to put them in office to serve us, not to abuse us. That's not what they're in here for. Law enforcement is supposed to be out here protecting us. And like I brought up here earlier in the show, and I bring it up again, I want you people to go back and look under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Congress can only create laws that deals with commerce, commercial activities, and foreign affairs. How are we going to deal with another country? Are we going to give them money? Are we going to sit down? Are we going to help them? They can only deal with commercial activity. There is nothing in the Constitution that allows them absolute jurisdiction to create laws against the people. There's nothing in there that gives them the authority to create laws against the people. And go back and check the state constitution. There's nothing in there that gives them absolute power to dictate to the people what they're going to do. Because in North Carolina's constitution, it sits here and says under Article 1, it says, under Article 1, Section 2, sovereignty of the people. All political power is vested and derived from the people. All government of rights of origin from the people is founded upon their will only, and it's instituted solely for the good of the whole. This is in South Carolina's Constitution. It says the sovereignty lies with the people. All political power is vested and derived from the people. All government of rights origin from the people. The people don't get their origin and get their rights from the government. It's the other way around. These people cannot create laws against John Q. Public. They can only deal with commerce. They can only deal with state issues. They can only deal with state matters. They can't create laws against the people. But they have come back in. That's why we got into the definition side of the word person, of what a person is. You know, every interrogation I've been in, oh, you're one of those who believe that the law don't apply to you. What makes you special? Let's go back and read the definition. Show me how it does apply. If you can show me how it applies to me, the flesh and blood, then there wouldn't be an issue here. But your laws are designed for corporations, associations, partnerships, trusts, joint stock insurance companies. How does that apply to me when the word person says it is to be construed to have this meaning? Doesn't say the word person is to be construed to mean flesh and blood, or Rod, or Art, or Shelley, or Bill, or Billy Bob Thornton. There's nothing in any laws that sits here and names the name of the people that this is what a person is. Their definition is precisely and exactly, it deals with corporations. And even that word individual, I went back and showed you, that is under Title V, government organizations, under 552A. And it applies only to the citizens within the United States, or of the United States, which is in that 10-mile square. And aliens. Some people, this is going to be a hard concept, but if you go back and actually read this stuff, once you start reading it and you realize, my God, this is simple. Show me how it applies. And they cannot sit here and show you how it applies to the people. They can't. And what you're doing, you're frustrating them and you're upsetting them because now you've learned to read. You've learned to think. You've learned to understand. And that's the last thing that they want. We're not saying the laws don't apply to us. We're sitting here show us how it does. You're the one that made the statement. Show me. These are your writings. Show it how it applies. That's all we're asking. Show me how it applies. It can't. So just be careful, ladies and gentlemen. Be very, very careful out here. You know, so I have a lot of respect for the police officers. I really do. I respect these guys, and I wish they would communicate so we could sit down and talk. But they've been told to stay away from me. Do not communicate with people like me because we would educate them, and they don't want them be knowledgeable. They want them to be conformed. They want them to be able to sit down and keep them anatomically as a robot. Just do what you're told. Don't think. And that's a shame because these guys really need to be educated because if they're going to carry a gun and a badge, and when you start talking law with them and you start showing them the law, then they should be able to sit back and say, you know what, we wasn't aware of this. We apologize. Have a good day. Now, we don't need to be arrogant with them. We don't need to be nasty and hostile. But if we sit down and talk reasonable with them and lay this stuff out and start explaining it and being able to sit back and show or tell them, then give them the benefit of the doubt to sit down and say, okay, well, we wasn't aware of this. And let them go. Yeah, well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night on this. Think about it. Just be careful. Just be very, very careful. Thank you.